Hey y'all, back at it again with another vegetarian classic update. This week we're going to tackle something that seems like it's a lot harder or sounds a lot harder than it actually is, and that's risotto. This big boy right here has some good recipes. A lot of it is similar to other cookbooks. You just need to tweak it a little bit to make it a little more palatable and a little less cookbooky. This risotto uses dried mushrooms for the stock as recommended in the recipe. They fully cook them and then use them in the risotto itself. I don't really like that. Dried mushrooms are cheap enough to use to make a really good stock, a really fragrant stock, but you don't really need to fully rehydrate and cook them and use them. I think they're more intended for this kind of use. I visited the local World Market to try and get some nicer dried mushrooms and some mushrooms you can't really get at the local grocery store. You could really do this with just baby portobellas and whatever you happen to find at your grocery store, but if you have an Asian market or anything like that, these specialty mushrooms are actually really cheap, really tasty, and you could use something like these king trumpets to resemble a couple pieces of steak or protein on top. Especially the way that we based and finished these. I also took a tip from some other YouTube videos I found to make this one fully vegan. I don't think it's missing a whole lot of the creaminess or tang that you end up getting from butter and Parmesan Reggiano or whatever cheese you would normally add to this at the end, which you can still do. When I add the vegan sour cream at the end, you could just instead do some butter, whatever cheese of your choice. It'll still be vegetarian and delicious, maybe more so to your palate, but I wanted to present something that was fully vegan, fully delicious, and really easy to finish off. Let's get into it. We're gonna start off by making the stock. All of the listed ingredients will be for one portion, and I'm doing two here. 1 handful dried mushrooms, a bay leaf, some peppercorns, and 3 to 3.5 cups of water, again, per portion. Get that on the stove and add some salt to taste. We're going to simmer that on low for at least 1 hour, checking on it every 10 minutes, flipping the dried mushrooms, and making sure everything's getting hydrated. Now, I went to a World Market across town to get some specialty mushrooms for inside and outside of here. I decided to go with some king trumpet mushrooms for garnish. They can be nice and meaty, and to kind of make them look that way, we went ahead and scored them crosshatch, so after we pan fry them, they're going to look like they have nice tasty grill marks on them. Trimming down king trumpet mushrooms is actually pretty easy. You can feel your knife along the edge, and wherever it starts to give, that's going to be where it's a lot more tender and a lot less tough. Going to do a quick marinade on these with a little olive oil and a little balsamic vinegar as well. Don't go too crazy on these. These mushrooms will soak up quite a bit. Add a little salt and pepper to taste. Mix them up with your hands. Set those aside for later. For the interior mushrooms, I went with some beach mushrooms since I was at the market and they look delicious. Prepping these is actually really easy. We'll just cut off the root here. It actually comes attached to the large mass that it grows on. And we're going to just trim the excess tougher ends on each one of these beach mushrooms and set them aside. I went with a 1/2 pound of those and a 1/2 pound of baby portobello mushrooms. We're just going to cut those down to about the same size as the average beach mushroom was. Now we'll prep everything else for the actual risotto. I'm going to do a half a shallot per portion. Here I use a full. We're going to dice that down as small as you prefer. I go pretty small usually so they can cook down and sweat out, but it's really up to your preference. This was a pretty large garlic clove, so I went ahead and counted that as 2. Again, everything listed here is for 1 portion, and I'm preparing a double. After an hour simmering, we're going to strain our stock through a strainer and a coffee filter. We use the filter just in case there's any sand in the dried mushrooms that's left over during the drying process. To prepare all of the mushrooms, we fill the pan with a little bit of oil and add those king trumpets. Because they're kind of strange shape and a full fry wouldn't really get them very well, we're going to baste one side while the bottom's frying. Flip over and continue that process. It'll make sure that these don't get too tough while we're getting those tasty grill marks. After just a few minutes of basting, let's remove those from the oil. Turn that down, and then add the rest of the mushrooms. Add some salt to taste to make sure they let out some of their moisture, and start to saute those while we get the risotto going. In a small to medium sauce pot, we're going to get some oil warm, add the shallots to that, and the garlic. Going to keep that nice and low. Make sure not to brown anything. We're just trying to saute until they're fragrant and translucent. We're going to keep checking on our mushrooms and flipping them around while we're starting the risotto. It should be pretty easy to get both of these going, but you can always get the mushrooms done ahead of time. Once fragrant and translucent, we're going to add a half a cup of short grain rice and toast that for no more than 2 minutes. And we're stirring this pretty constantly. Going too much toast before we deglaze with white wine will kind of ruin the end result of how the risotto feels in your mouth. After deglazing, we're going to add 1 cup of stock initially, and then half a cup of stock every time after. Continuously checking on those mushrooms and continuously stirring the risotto as the stock begins to be absorbed. Remember, we're going low and slow on this. We don't want to see too many bubbles forming, and we don't want to see the liquid level getting too low. Now, because I'm adding the mushrooms to this and also using vegan sour cream to replace the butter and cheese, I'm actually going to go a little thicker than I normally would. I'm going to add those cooked mushrooms to the rice after it's cooked to your liking. And fold it in gently. At this point, when you would traditionally add some butter and cheese, we're going to go ahead and add 1.5 tablespoons of vegan sour cream per portion. That's going to really soften it up, add something really creamy and still tangy to imitate all that stuff that you like about traditional risotto, while keeping it as a vegan option. As always, a little salt and pepper to taste. And some very simple, elegant plating. Throw some heaping spoonfuls into a bowl. We're going to take 2 pieces of those king trumpet mushrooms, set them gently on top, and drizzle a little bit of toasted sesame oil on top. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, like, comment, and subscribe. It really does help us out. Make sure to check out the last video and come back every week for another delicious vegan or vegetarian dish from the past.